GOP presidential candidates Rick Perry and Newt Gingrich say when it comes to foreign aid, let's just get rid of it.
The foreign aid budget in my administration for every country is going to start at $0.
You're giving some countries $7 billion a year. So you start off, or in the case of Egypt, $3 billion a year. So you start off every year and say, here's your $3 billion, now I'll start thinking. You ought to start off at zero and say, explain to me why I should give you a penny.
But is it really a good idea to stop money flowing to countries like Pakistan and maybe Saudi Arabia? Joining us right now to weigh in is Republican Senator from Florida, Senator Marco Rubio. Senator Rubio, I imagine you watched the debate.
I did most of it, yes.
Yes, and your thoughts about where the Republicans, the GOP, those 8 on stage, stay on land on international relations?
Well, I think a lot of them are developing, and I think that for the most part they did a good job on the stage of kind of outlining their position. I think there's a debate in the Republican Party right now about where we should be on foreign policy. But ultimately, I think we've always been the party of a strong national defense. We've always been the party that understands the role of America in the world and how, at the end of the day, every aspect of our daily lives, especially our economic lives, are directly impacted by things that happen halfway around the world. We just have to continue to make that argument because it happens to be true, and the American people need to know that.
So which camp were you in? Because Gingrich and Perry seem to be of the belief that we should start at zero, and then see if they deserve money. Santorum and Bachmann disagreed with that.
Yeah, I think start at zero. I don't put words in their mouth, but I think what they mean is we need to examine all of our foreign aid and make sure that it makes sense. I mean, there's never been a good time to waste money, and now is certainly not one of those times. On the other hand, the foreign aid that we put out is a very small part of our overall budget and an important part of it. But I do think there have to be performance matrix associated with it. There's something called Millennium Challenge grants that are based on that. You give money to people, but you actually fund specific projects, and you measure what it's going towards and whether it's advancing our national interests. So that's what they meant by start at zero. I don't know if that's a bad idea. I think it's important that our money be accounted for, but we need to have a foreign aid budget. It's important for our national security.
Right. It's not a black and white issue. Saudi Arabia, yeah, the hijackers from Saudi Arabia, but there's a lot of allies within that government, so it's something that needs to be nuanced, perhaps. I want to bring you to a few weeks ago, as you know, the Washington Post decides Marco Rubio is getting too popular. Let's find something to attack him with. In that time, you fired back, went on Bill O'Reilly, answered some questions, and now your popularity is climbing once again because of the way you handled it. Does that make you more apt to maybe reconsider a VP run?
No, I'm focused on my job as a senator from Florida, and if anything, to the extent that I don't pay a lot of attention to the polls, because if I do, I have to pay attention to the bad ones too. What I would say is I'm focused on representing Florida in the United States Senate. It's what 100% of our focus is on, and make sure that Florida's voice is heard on all these issues that confront our country, including foreign policy that you've just asked me about. Right. And I hope that it's reflective of that.
So one of the reasons that your name keeps coming up is because you're from Florida, which is such an important state in the presidential election. And also you represent the Latinos and possibly a huge chunk of the Latino vote, which we know is ever growing in our nation. I want to bring you to this next topic, which is, should conservatives stop talking about immigration right now? I want you to listen to Linda Chavez, who was once a nominee for one of the posts in an administration. She had this to say on Fox and Friends.
All of the public opinion polls that have been taken in the last year in which people are asked what are the most important voting issues for you, illegal immigration ranks at the very bottom. 2 to 4% of American voters think that it's the single most important issue. The other thing is, Gretchen, is that Republicans ought to be patting themselves on the back and saying, hey, we have had a real impact on slowing illegal immigration. Illegal immigration now is at the same level as it was in 1972.
Do you agree with Ms. Chavez?
Well, first of all, jobs in the economy is the #1 issue. We should be focused on that. It should be 90% of our focus right now in terms of domestic policies because people are hurting. And by the way, that happens to be true in the Latino community. Americans of Hispanic descent have been hurt very badly by the president's economic policies, and we need to make that case. I would just say this about immigration and illegal immigration. It remains a problem that has to be confronted. It's also an opportunity because I think a legal immigration system that works is going to be really good for America. So what I've been saying is the following. The Republican Party should not be labeled as the anti-illegal immigration party. Republicans need to be the pro-legal immigration party. And I think it's time for our candidates not just to talk about what they're against. Everybody, we're against amnesty, and people get that. But what are we for? Let's start talking about how we modernize our legal immigration system. How do we create a guest worker program that functions? How do we reform our visa program so that it takes into account the challenges of the 21st century? Ultimately, how do we come up with a legal immigration system that honors our legacy as a nation of immigrants, but also honors our legacy as a nation of laws?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point of view, and you would know something about that particular topic and so much more. Always great to pick your brain on different thoughts. Senator Marco Rubio, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me this morning.